All right, the stream is getting started. Hello everyone. I'm Madison Young. I'm the host of this channel, Busting Open Science. I'm currently a neuroscience major at the University of Texas at Dallas, and the goal of today is to basically analyze a research article, and hopefully make it easy to understand for anyone who's watching. I feel like that a lot of research articles are very confusing for most people, even myself, and that makes it very unfair for uh, people who are in college versus anyone who has not gone to college or isn't interested in science. So my goal is to make it easy for you to understand. All right, then let's get started with the article. So First off, obviously, the basics about a research article is that there's a title and then some basic information about the research article. So here we have the title called Preprint Peer Review Enhances Undergraduate Biology Students' Disciplinary Literacy and Sense of Belonging in STEM. So that's a mouthful of a title, and I've struggled to understand that off the bat. So I'll just go word by word to break down the title. Preprint is basically it's a rough draft of a research article before a researcher has actually published it in a journal. So a researcher can choose to upload their rough draft onto some open servers, and so other researchers can also look at the rough draft and provide their feedback, which is called peer review. So more clearly, peer review is where other researchers and other experts will review a person's work and then give feedback. So we basically have review of rough drafts, enhances undergraduate biology students' disciplinary literacy. So this phrase basically means that um, their ability to understand research articles and other literature inside their field of study. So in this case, since they're biology students, their disciplinary literacy would be how literate they are at reading a biology research article. So how well you can read an article in a particular field of study. Okay, and sense of belonging in STEM. So STEM is just science, technology, engineering, and math. And so basically, if we were to understand the simpler version of the title, it's basically saying being able to review rough drafts enhances undergraduate biology students' ability to read research articles in biology and their sense of belonging in the STEM community. Okay, and then we have this running title. Now, a running title is basically the shorter and simpler version of the title that will appear at the top of every single page on this PDF. So in this case, we should look out for undergraduate disciplinary literacy in peer review. So the authors of this article are Josie L. Otto, Gary S. McDowell, Meena M. Balgopal, and Rebeccah S. Lijek. And these are their attributions. So since they have the little number asterisks floating next to them, that will tell us which one they are from. So that would mean that Josie is from Colorado State University, and then Gary is a PhD student at Lightar LLC. Meena is also a PhD student and also at Colorado State. And Rebeccah is also a PhD student at the Mount Holyoke College. So source of support is where the study likely got their funding, because research is expensive, and so many different foundations and organizations will provide grants and funds to help researchers conduct their research. So that's what source of support means. And so in this case, we have the National Science Foundation, and looks like they were given an award. So the National Science Foundation Award of a numbers, collaborative research, and developing biology. And then the numbers, figures, tables, and any supplementary materials. So supplementary materials are basically extra data and information that couldn't make it into the final draft, and so they put it as a separate document that people can access. So it's saying that in the supplemental materials, there are 4 figures, or basically 4 visual pieces of information, 4 tables of data, and 2 appendices in the supplementary document. Okay, conflict of interest notification. So conflict of interest in research is when 2 researchers may be doing research on 2 different topics, and those topics happen to conflict with each other. Perhaps they're looking for opposite results, or they both have different theories that don't agree with each other. So in this case, it says JLO, MMB, and RSL have no conflicts to declare. GSM is a consultant who carries out contract work based on his expertise with respect to early career researchers and scholarly publishing. So basically means they weren't worried about having conflicting ideas with anybody. Okay. Oh, I should preface that I have not read the article yet myself. So this is all fresh and live reaction. Okay. So the abstract. The abstract of any research article is basically a summary of the research. I don't know why they use the word abstract. I really think summary is much easier to understand, but I don't make the rules. So, undergraduate education on science publishing and peer review is limited compared to focus on experimental research. Wow, already that is a handful. So, it's basically saying education for undergraduate students about how science articles are published and how they are reviewed is limited, and compared to how much focus that professors and other teachers place on conducting research. So that was also kind of confusing, but anecdotally, I'm currently a college student, and a lot of my professors emphasize being in the lab, getting hands-on experience doing research, but they never really talk about how you actually publish a research article, how do you publish science, how do you review science and make sure that it's quality, and make sure there's quality control and that everything is backed by evidence and you're not just making up numbers. So they don't talk about the second half, which is arguably very important because scientific publishing allows researchers to share their findings and results, and peer review makes sure that any research that is published is backed by solid practices and numbers, and not just random people posting random findings. So, since peer review is integral to the scientific process and central to the identity of a science, we envision a paradigm shift that makes teaching peer review integral to undergraduate science education and hypothesize that this may facilitate the development of student scientific literacy and identity formation. Whew, that's still a mouthful. Okay, so since peer review is integral, that basically means important I really wish people just used easier to understand words. Since peer review is important to the scientific process and also important to the identity of a scientist, we envisioned a paradigm shift, which basically means a shift in how things are done. That makes teaching peer review important to undergraduate scientific education. And they also hypothesize or speculate that this may facilitate the development of students' scientific literacy and identity formation. So basically, they think that teaching undergraduate students, basically um, first through fourth year college students, how to review research and give feedback will help them improve their ability to read research articles and their identity as a scientist. So scientific literacy means the ability to read and understand science. Okay. To this end, we developed a curriculum for biology undergraduates to learn about the mechanisms of peer review. And then they write and publish their own peer reviews as a way to authentically join the scientific community of practice. So basically, they taught undergraduate students how to peer review a research article and then had them try it out on their own and give their own feedback and publish that feedback as a way to prove that they are real scientists. Authentically join the scientific community of practice. That's funny. It's a very convoluted way of saying it. The curriculum was implemented as a semester-long intervention in one class and as a module intervention embedded into a discipline-based class on vaccines. So they implemented this curriculum into a semester-long class. I'll type this. Implemented the curriculum, or I should say implemented the peer review curriculum in a semester-long class. And they also implement it as modules in a discipline-based class. So that would be usually a shorter class that is focused around a single topic. So usually a discipline-based class might meet once a week for a couple hours, so maybe like a 2-hour class once a week, and they basically talk about that one topic. So in this case, the discipline-based class is on vaccines. Short lessons in a discipline in a class focused on vaccines. Okay. Before and after both interventions, we measured students' scientific literacy, including peer review ability, using quantitative methods. Quantitative methods literally means methods that measures numbers. That's very abstract. Okay. We also carried out a longitudinal qualitative assessment of students' perceptions of their scientific literacy and identity using thematic analysis of students' writing. Whew, okay. So longitudinal qualitative assessment basically means a test that measures subjective opinions. And then longitudinal just means long. So a long test, it can be either mean a long test, as in the test itself was very long, or the test measures a very long length of time. So in this case, I actually think it means the test is measuring a long length of time. So we also carried out a longitudinal qualitative assessment of students' perceptions, yes. So that would mean a test that measures subjective opinions over a long period of time. Now the word long period of time is also a bit debatable in the scientific community. It also depends on what field of study you're in, but generally, usually 1 to 2 weeks is considered short, at least in my opinion. So anything like greater than 2 weeks would generally be considered long. But that's just my opinion. You can't, that one's probably, there's probably no hard definition on what a long period of time is considered to be. So we also carried out a longitudinal qualitative assessment of students' perceptions of their scientific literacy and identity using thematic analysis of students' writing. So basically they told them to write write a short essay on a theme, and then I'm guessing it was about themselves and their own perception, since that's what it says. So write a short essay on the theme of you being a scientist. And then they measured the development and progression of their changing identity through these essays. Okay. Here we present data on the improvement in peer review ability of undergraduates in both classes and data on the curriculum's interrelated impact on students' development of scientific literacy, identity, and belonging in academic and professional spaces. These data suggest that undergraduates can and should be trained in peer review to foster the interrelated development of their scientific literacy, scientific identity, and sense of belonging in science. So basically they're presenting data on how much these students' ability to review research articles improved, and then it's saying that based on the data, undergraduates can and should be trained to peer review research articles. So that's this part. Okay. So these keywords are generally used for search engines. So if you search these terms in a search engine like Google or Google Scholar, this just helps the search engine find this research article. So keywords this one is based off of is peer review, science literacy, disciplinary literacy, science identity, sense of belonging, community of practice, and scholarly communication. So keywords are used by search engines to find research articles. Okay. So main body of the paper. What's actually very interesting to me is that this research article is actually not formatted like a usual research article. It's formatted in this typical Word document format. Research articles tend to have a almost newspapery feel to it, so there's like small text and a bunch of different columns of paragraphs next to each other. But I like that this text is easy to read. Okay, on to the introduction. Now, the introduction of any article basically provides a summary and background context of the main topic. So, provides background context of the main topic. Okay. Undergraduate science education often focuses on how research experiments are carried out and the knowledge generated by the resulting research literature. But it misses an opportunity to engage students in the critical validation process that translates one into the other, the peer review of primary scientific literature. Whew, okay, so undergraduate science education focuses on the experiment and research process itself. So focuses on conducting experiments and research, but it does not teach them to critically evaluate and analyze scientific articles. So primary scientific literature, that is based off of like the idea of like a primary source, which is like first-hand experience. So primary scientific literature would mean it's an article that's directly reporting on the experiment itself. So it's not like a secondhand article you might find in like more commonly known journals like National Geographic. So if you see any scientific articles in National Geographic, those would be considered either secondary or tertiary articles because they've been analyzed and simplified for the general public to understand, but it doesn't contain the actual direct data and evidence that was in the primary scientific article. So, first-hand data. All right. Authentic laboratory experiences, e.g., or for example, cures, independent research, are becoming recognized as important to undergraduate science education as they enculturate students in the scientific community and increase understanding about the principles of experimental research. So it's basically saying real life lab experience. Is being recognized as important for teaching college students as they become part of the scientific community. Enculturate, I've never heard of that word before. And it helps them understand the principle of experimental research. This basically helps them understand how research is done. Principles of experimental research. It's very complicated. The value of early research experiments depends on them being authentic, aka real, and within a community of practice. So, a community of researchers. So, see Table 1 for a definition of terms 1 through 3. Okay, so I skipped over it because I didn't quite know what it meant, or rather I thought they were citations. So there is this parentheses 1, and then there should also be, I don't know why they're saying see Table 1 for a definition of terms 1 through 3 when there's only 1 in parentheses. If we scroll down, we should be able to see Table 1 though. Nope. It should be at the very end. But scrolling down is quite long. I wonder if they made it clickable. They did not make the PDF clickable. That's unfortunate. Oh well. Okay, back to reading the article. Moreover, implicit teaching of scientific inquiry through experimentation is insufficient for students to learn how scientists engage in inquiry. As a result, scientists' experiences of science and what students in classrooms learn about and conceive of the process of science are demonstrably different. Wow, that is a very confusing sentence. Okay. So moreover, implicit teaching of scientific inquiry through experimentation. So basically meaning forcing the student to figure it out on their own. That implicit is basically what that means. So forcing students to figure it out on their own through experimenting by themselves, through their own experiments. Experiments is not enough to teach them how to analyze a research article. Yeah, I would have never guessed. You need to teach someone how to analyze like complex information. So because we are forcing them to figure it out on their own, scientists' experiences of science and what students in the classrooms learn about and understand are different. So basically, there's a difference between what students learn about in the classroom and how scientists actually do research. Okay. So, missing from many undergraduate research experiments are experiences, are opportunities to learn how scientists communicate through scholarly publishing and peer review. We posit, as in we propose, that providing undergraduates with explicit instruction in authentic forms of scientific communication, like peer review, will develop their scientific literacy and disciplinary literacy. Basically, real forms of scientific communication. Okay, so missing from many undergraduate research experiences are opportunities to learn about how scientists actually communicate their findings. So, the hypothesis or their claim that this research paper is making is that by providing undergraduate college students with direct instruction about how to peer review will help them develop their scientific skills. Explicit instruction, so basically by directly teaching them. By directly teaching them real forms of scientific communication, like reviewing a research article, reviewing and analyzing research article, it will help them develop their scientific skills. So that sounds pretty logical right off the bat. Or, well, it sounds like a no-brainer, really. If you teach someone how to do it, they'll know how to do it. Okay. One way in which undergraduates can learn about and engage in real scientific communication or scientific conversation with a community of practicing researchers is by participating in the peer review of manuscripts. So manuscripts is just another word for a rough draft of a research article that hasn't been published yet. Okay. So peer review is integral or important to the scientific process. Yet real scholarship experiences for undergraduates, such as writing and publishing manuscript reviews, basically reviewing rough drafts, are rare. So I should write that down. Reviewing rough drafts are rare. The process of peer review is the backbone of scientific inquiry and a central component of the identity of a scientist. So, basically, sorry, I was checking the live stream, making sure everything was going good. But it says the process of peer review is the backbone of scientific inquiry. So basically, reviewing each other's research is important to science and a central component of the identity of a scientist. So the reason why they say a central component of the identity of a scientist, my understanding is that you must reach, or at least currently how the process is, you have to reach a certain level of expertise and knowledge in order to be able to give someone else feedback on their research. So generally that happens when you are considered a postdoc. I think that's the earliest you might be allowed to give others feedback. So I guess the progression of the career of a scientist would go undergraduate college student, then you would graduate and become a graduate student, which is basically a PhD. Then you would graduate from a PhD and become a postdoctoral or postdoc. And then finally you'd become a assistant professor, and if you're lucky, you'd become a professor, although professor positions are limited. Or you can also go into industry, which basically means you work for a private company's research and development department rather than going into formal research like this. So formal research would just be you stay within the academic and college community. So, or you can become an industry researcher even with a master's degree. So that would just be undergraduate to industry researcher, and you can have a master's. Now, a master's is considered less than a PhD in terms of qualifications, although PhDs tend to be highly specific to formal research and stuff like that. Generally, if you do hold a PhD, you'd be overqualified for a lot of different jobs in the normal world. So if you just want to become a researcher in like an R&D department, then getting a master's is good enough. And a master's usually takes 4 years, similar to how a typical college student also takes 4 years, so you'd be in college for 8 years. Although there are some programs that will let you fast track a master's program and you can get your bachelor's and master's degree in 6 years. So, that tangent aside, back to the article, the process of reviewing each other's research is important to science, and it's important to the identity of a scientist. Okay, that's where I went off on the tangent. So basically, because you must be considered at least a postdoc to review others' research, um, being able to review someone's research is considered prestigious because it's an acknowledgement about how knowledgeable you are. And so that's why it's important to your identity of a scientist, because it finally means other scientists consider you qualified enough to look at their research. So it justifies public confidence in scientific results and drives decisions about what research is published and funded. Therefore, education about peer review and participation in real peer review or authentic peer review ought to occupy a central role in undergraduate science education. In the same vein as education about experimental research and participation in laboratory research. In the same vein as education about experimental research and participation in laboratory research. So, the fact that it's cut off between 2 pages makes it kind of hard to read. But it's basically saying peer review builds public confidence in scientific results because any scientific result that is peer-reviewed generally means that multiple experts have looked at it and confirm that the science is sound and it's not like hurriedly done or there aren't that many flaws. There are always flaws in any research article, but peer review helps find the major flaws, and then it also identifies what more research needs to be done to address the flaws in the previous article. So it's a continuous cycle. So therefore, education about peer review and participation in authentic peer review ought to occupy a central role in undergraduate science education, just as education about real research and participation in research is. So basically saying we should teach students to peer review. We should teach students to peer review just like how we emphasize teaching them to get hands-on lab experience. Okay. Peer review is a form of disciplinary literacy, and as such, peer review is often reserved for those perceived as experts, such as faculty, and explicitly excludes students, because students are considered dumb and don't know anything yet. Yet, how can students develop disciplinary literacy if they are not provided instruction in authentic practice in this essential skill? So they define disciplinary literacy here, where basically they say disciplinary literacy means to be able to think, read, and communicate information like an expert in a particular discipline. So basically, if you don't teach them to do this, how would you expect them to develop this skill? So, therefore, peer review represents part of STEM's hidden curriculum of unstated norms, values, skills, and expectations that are untaught yet required for success. So it's like a hidden standard that you have to figure out on your own. So since peer review is important to the scientific process and to the central identity of a scientist, we envision a paradigm shift that makes teaching peer review important to undergraduate science education. So we envision a paradigm shift, so basically a shift in how things are normally done. That makes teaching peer review important to undergraduate science education. Just as early research experiences help students form a scientific identity and develop science literacy, so too could early scholarship experiences in peer review. So basically giving them internships in peer review. So giving them internship experiences in peer review. So generally there are, most of the time peer review is controlled by a journal. And so to explain the background, generally if you are a researcher looking to publish your work, you would write up your research article and then present your rough draft to a journal, and the journal would take a look at your rough draft. They would peer review it, basically give you feedback on it. You would make edits to your research, and then finally, eventually, hopefully, your work gets published in the journal. So right now, peer review is mostly controlled by scientific journals. And so obviously someone has to do the work of reviewing the research. And so journals will recruit other experts to help look at a research article. And so basically this is saying that journals should provide internship experiences to help teach them peer review and get some hands-on experience reviewing articles. So to this end, we developed and assessed a constructivist service learning curriculum for undergraduates to learn about the mechanisms of peer review and then write and publish their own peer reviews as a way to join the scientific community of practice. So they developed a curriculum that emphasizes constructivist. I want to provide an accurate definition for that one. Okay. So constructivism, according to the University at Buffalo, says that it's a theory that says learners construct knowledge rather than just passively taking information. So kind of like how instead of students sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture and the teacher just droning on and on, students are actively engaging in the learning process. And service learning is okay. So according to I'm going to reference Boise State University because that is my local university. So it says service learning is enhances, I should say this. That's a bad definition. So service learning enhances student learning and addresses critical community issues and builds students' capabilities to be change makers. So basically hands-on learning, engaged and hands-on learning. That is actually accomplishing something. That is accomplishing something. Okay, to learn, to this end, we developed and assessed a curriculum that emphasizes engaged, hands-on learning that actually accomplishes something for undergraduates to learn about the mechanisms of peer review, and then write their own peer reviews as a way to join the scientific community. So as a way to contribute to the scientific community. Okay. This contrasts with the traditional didactic model of peer review education currently practiced in laboratories. So didactic would just mean very lecture heavy. So our recent analysis of early career scientists revealed that formal evidence-based instruction in peer review is rare. And so there is an unmet need to develop curricula on this topic. The curriculum was designed with the goal of positively contributing to student learning, pedagogical research, and society. Oh, it's hard to say. Pedagogical. There we go. And that just basically means teaching research or teaching/instructional research. It leveraged an innovation in scientific publishing, preprint, which are scientific manuscripts uploaded by the authors to a free public server, often at the same time as submission to a peer-reviewed journal. Okay. It leveraged an innovation in scientific publishing. Oh, preprints. I think that should be a colon there, because I think it's trying to emphasize preprints. So it leveraged preprints. So preprints are a fairly new idea in the scientific community, where most of the time, in order to read someone else's research, you have to pay in order to download and access it. But in this case, people are uploading their rough drafts when they are ready to publish or submit their research for a journal for review at the same time. So if we have our researcher down here, then he has his paper, or he or she has his paper, and you have your journal, which will publish it for you, and then you have your open access server. They will upload it to both. And so the journal will peer review their research and then finally help them improve upon it before finally publishing it. But their rough draft will remain free to access on the public server so that anyone can read it. So this research article we're looking at now is actually uploaded onto a public server called bioRxiv. So that's where I got access to this research article. Depositing articles as preprints on servers prior to journal submission has long been a normal practice in fields such as physics and mathematics, and has recently grown in popularity in the biological sciences. Okay, then I should revise what I said earlier. So it's pretty common in physics and mathematics, I guess, but it's more new in biological sciences. So biological sciences might include ecology or typical biology, which is like study of animals and living cells, and also includes my major, which is neuroscience, or studying the brain. At the same time, experiments in open and pre and post publication peer review have created preprint review platforms such as Review Commons, Early Evidence-Based Society, and Pre-Review. These platforms remove peer review from the exclusive realm of journals to increase participation in the peer review process. In contrast to participating in traditional journal club activities using already finalized and published journal articles, undergraduates now have the opportunity to engage in authentic peer review experiences, see work in progress, and experience the joy of working to improve the integrity and clarity of scientific manuscripts. Ooh, okay. So it mentions a few platforms such as Review Commons, Early Evidence-Based Society, and Pre-Review. So basically, these are organizations that will do just peer review and only look at the article and help give feedback, but they don't necessarily always publish the article. So basically, this is just focusing on helping researchers improve their research before they want to publish it. So when it says that they remove the peer review process from the exclusive realm of journals, that basically means that journals right now have kind of like a monopoly on peer review. And really, before these platforms came about, journals were the only way to get feedback on your research um, and improve upon it. But now with these new platforms, you can get feedback without having to consult a journal. And the reason why people might want to do this is because journals typically have their own mission or focus. And so if your research is not related to their mission, they won't look at it at all. So it kind of, if you try to go to a journal for feedback, it might limit who you can try to get feedback from. So in contrast to participating in traditional journal club activities using already finalized and published journal articles, undergraduate students now have the opportunity to engage in real peer review experiences and experience the joy of working to improve the integrity and clarity of scientific manuscripts. Basically, experience the joy of improving research. So experience of improving research. So, using preprints instead of published primary literature circumvents the problem that engagement with published literature overlooks the authentic growth processes that occur prior to publication. It gives students a retrospective narrative of scholarship instead of the more realistic view of science as a constant work in progress in which failures and corrections are common. So generally, if you are a current college student and you get lecture from your professors, all of the stuff that you're being told in class is generally research that has been checked over and over again, and there's a lot of evidence backing it up. And so it creates this expectation in students that all research is always 100% true, but there's always often a lot of mistakes in a rough draft. And so being able to get feedback from other experts helps people analyze and improve their research. And so that's why it's emphasizing the constant work in progress rather than a retrospective narrative of everything is correct. And then for the first sentence, using preprints instead of published primary literature circumvents the problem that engagement, oh, that's kind of wordy. But basically that sentence is saying by looking at rough drafts, we get around the problem of the stereotype, or not necessarily stereotype, the expectation that all published science is 100% fact. Expectation. So undergraduates may struggle to reconcile final polished work with their personal experiences with science, failed experiments, negative data, disproven hypotheses. This disconnect could in turn negatively affect their sense of belonging in science and their understanding of the nature of science. So, basically, if you're an undergraduate college student and you read all of these textbook facts, you believe that every experiment will always get you a 100% proven result. But that's very often not the case. So, like this article is saying, there's a lot of failed experiments, a lot of negative data, and a lot of hypotheses that don't go anywhere. And so if you if all you ever see is a textbook full of 100% proven things, or what you believe to be 100% proven, and then you fail to do anything, that's very discouraging. And so, but that is the real reality that textbooks don't show you. Another advantage to using preprints, so real research has a lot of failures. But you don't expect that, and so then that discourages you. Don't expect that, and it discourages them. Another advantage to using preprints live first draft manuscripts is that it gives students an opportunity to authentically help real scientists improve their work by sharing their reviews with the authors. I think that one's probably a self-explanatory sentence, so it gives them a chance to give real feedback. Gives them a chance to give real feedback. Students had the opportunity to publish their peer reviews of preprints on open access, journal-independent internet platforms as a way to authentically engage with the scientific literature and the scientific community of practice. Basically saying they uploaded their feedback onto online platforms that, I can't say free speech, but online platforms that allowed not allowed free speech, but open communication. And the opposite of open communication would be closed communication, where you have to pay to access it. So I'm going to make a little note of that here. Closed communication, pay to access it. Communication, there we go. Access is missing an S. All right. So, using an apprenticeship model to explore an undefined space of learning, the curriculum aimed to facilitate student self-development and self-expression within a community of practice, both within an academic setting and a professional setting. So academic setting, they mean engaging with peers in the classroom, and a professional setting, which is engaging with authors, or authors are usually what we call researchers that are in their publishing phase rather than experimental phase. So authors are equal to researchers that are writing up their scientific findings. Okay. Here we present findings from an exploratory study that used mixed methods to the interrelated impact of our curricular intervention on students' sense of science identity, literacy, and belonging in academic and professional spaces. Whew, okay. Basically, they're presenting their findings. An exploratory study is basically, I would consider that more an observational study, where you're not doing like the typical control group, and then you have your independent group and stuff like that. So basically you're just setting something out and watching it happen. That use mixed methods, or basically multiple methods. to the interrelated, mixed methods to the interrelated impact. I think they're missing a word there. Mixed methods to measure, it should probably be measure, to measure the, interrelated impact of our curriculum's intervention on students' sense of science identity, literacy, and belonging in the academic and professional spaces. So we hypothesized that this curriculum, by explicitly teaching students about peer review and authentically engaging them in a community of practice, would improve science students' disciplinary literacy, specifically peer reviewability, and foster a sense of scientific identity and belonging in the scientific community. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the hypothesis. So this is the claim they are making. Then, by explicitly teaching students about peer review and then authentically engaging them in the community, in the science community, it would improve their ability to understand science in a specific field, and foster a sense of identity as a scientist and belonging in the scientific community. Okay. And then we are on to the methods. Alrighty. So that is it for all of the background information on what this article is hoping to achieve and why they believe it's important. So if I were to summarize it, they're basically saying why our work is important. Right now, or currently, peer review is not taught in college, but students are expected to figure it out on their own. But being taught this formally, so being formally taught how to peer review would help students gain more confidence as scientists. It would also teach them about how science is really done. Okay. So that is where we will stop today. We will look at the methods next time. So I plan on live streaming on Saturday and Sunday, so if you'd like to watch this live and give your comments and feedback directly as I'm reading it, then you can expect me on Saturday or Sunday. Alright then, but I hope anyone who watches this does get some understanding out of what we've talked about today, and hopefully reading a research article isn't as scary as you thought. Honestly, a research article is mostly filled with useless extra big words. I personally wish that scientists just use normal words when they wrote articles, because really there's no need to use these convoluted big words. But oh well, you have to prove you're smart somehow, and that means using big words, I guess. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe or comment your thoughts down below, and I will see you next time. Bye!